What's up, fighters? Fuma Kodachi here, and after long last, we have it officially announced that Dead or Alive is not dead, but alive. Why the pun? Well, I think it's about time to break it all down, because so much is happening in the world of DOA, and while this is news all us fighters really wanted to hear, some of the details have been splitting the fandom apart. So fighters, let's get right to it, and let's talk about Dead or Alive 6. But before we talk about the new, we have to go back in time, a couple of months to an announcement, or rather lack of an announcement. In December of 2018, it was announced to everyone that Dead or Alive 5 was done. After a rather big tournament, we were all eagerly awaiting the announcement of DOA6 or some other kind of new development. DOA5 had been around for many years, and it was time for Team Ninja to breathe some new life into the franchise. But instead, we got a rather cryptic statement that hinted at the worst. While they did also mention that the team is very active, it didn't really do much to give us fighters hope. Was this the end? Was DOA done for? What other projects could they be working on? For many months, we all waited, patiently, hoping at some time, or maybe during a tournament or big event, that something would be announced. But we were all met with silence. That was until June of this same year. A reveal trailer was finally announced, showing the first glimpses of what would become the next Dead or Alive. Finally, Dead or Alive was alive, and coming out with a brand new iteration packed full of new stories and hopefully new characters to learn and understand. I eagerly shared this news with all I could, and tried my best to gather as much information as possible. Who was going to be in it? What stages were going to be available? Have the graphics improved? Are there new combos or functions built in to enhance the gameplay even more than in DOA 5? Sadly, there wasn't a whole lot revealed, much past the trailer itself, and some new costumes and visuals during fights, along with a small roster, so we had to wait to see what else Team Ninja had in store for us. And, as with most things, our patience was rewarded. Not long after, more information was being revealed and leaked. The direction of the game, the plans the developers had, and what we could look forward to. While there was a lot to be excited about and encouraged by, this, my fellow fighters, is when a rift in the community started to form. Now, as we all know, Dead or Alive is quite famous for its impressive graphics, dynamic and fluid 3D fighting, and fan service. Yes, despite what some may say, DOA has always served a wonderful visual background, impactful sound effects, and beautiful characters in one complete design. But this design was very clearly focused on making characters that not just fought well, but looked beautiful and attractive. Suffice to say, as a famous commercial for DOA 3 pointed out back in the day when someone was playing as Kasumi said, "She kicks high." While most of us fans and fighters accepted this and even grew attracted to the game because of it, it wasn't long before the wider gaming audience began to form opinions of their own. Now, this fan service, and the way the female fighters specifically were depicted in increasingly exposed or revealing costumes, began to give DOA a particular reputation. This did not stop, however, the likes of DOA 2, 3, and 4 from being popular and successful in the professional scene. But as times changed, as most gamers saw in recent years, the atmosphere around games and gaming has changed. While this is for better or for worse, it has caused a change in how games are being developed and portrayed. After this, we saw DOA 5 release with a focus on more realistic character models and fighting styles, while taking a lighter hand to the fan service, but still being sure to give some specific fans the type of costumes and visuals they had come to know and love. It was around this time that we saw the very first version of the Extreme Volleyball series of DOA not released in the West, due to backlash from societal differences and what was considered acceptable. So instead of releasing it in the US and risking more bad coverage as well as potential losses in revenue, Team Ninja decided to make an English subbed version available for order overseas only. Which brings us to now, to the release of Dead or Alive 6 and the divide that is quickly happening within our community. When it was announced that DOA6 would take an even greater reduction in its fan service-based approach to the game, as well as naturalizing and reducing more sexualized aspects of the female fighters, this was all being done in an effort to make them look more realistic, while emphasizing that the developers wanted to be sure the characters were still pleasing to look at. They are focusing on a direction that makes the fighting feel more impactful and visceral. Now, this is no Mortal Kombat, mind you, but seeing our fighters now take actual damage, being bruised, tarnished, scuffed, and hurt, will be a visual indicator of how your battle is going, in an effort to make the fights both feel and look more intense. There is also a change in the costume design, with the more traditional style of Dead or Alive making way for outfits that would more represent a fighter in their field. For example, seeing Kasumi in more ninja-like attire with less exposed skin, being replaced with stitched armor and layered plates that would actually protect her. Here, fighters is where the rift is happening. While there's a good portion of fighters who are excited and happy for this change, loving the chance at seeing a new direction and approach to DOA, along with a new focus on realism and a cool aspect over a sexy one, there's the other half who is very disappointed and vocally opposed to this new change, claiming that this is the opposite of what DOA was, and what it should be, that the fan service, while a large portion of the game, was something that should be accepted and embraced as a part of the game's design and roots, essentially a tradition of the game that should be kept and respected. They see this change as outward pressures winning over what the original game was intended to be. The developers have been sure to mention that they hear both sides of this argument, and that nothing is set in stone, but that these are only hints at their vision and where they want the game and its design to go. I myself am a bit torn on this new development. While I do love seeing new options, fighters, and visuals in the DOA realm, I have to admit that it's very apparent the kind of reputation DOA has, and I understand a desire to want to fit the changing climate around gaming, as well as attract a new audience to the franchise. I'm not ashamed of it. It's all part of the game, and it draws men and women alike, despite what some people may say. But that isn't to say that I reject change or a new perspective on things I like. I would like to see a more visceral, intense look on DOA. I'd like to see what a more realistic version of my favorite fighters would look like, and how they would react and adapt in this new environment. But on that same note, I believe that a lot of those things I just mentioned could exist alongside that which made me love DOA in the first place. I don't believe that they are mutually exclusive. Why can't we have a game that keeps some of the fan service, as well as push the boundaries of how intense and visceral a fight could be, at least relative to the DOA universe? Not all fighters are agreeing on this. I've seen many communities and fighters tearing each other apart over this new direction, and it makes me sad in a way I didn't think I ever really would be. There are those on both sides, wanting the new direction and leaving the old behind, and those wanting to keep the old and move forward without leaving behind tradition. While each may have their reasons and their arguments, I don't really see either as being wrong, but I don't necessarily agree with their reasoning or vitriol at each other when we're so early in development and also clearly just wanting the same thing: a great game and a continuation of our favorite fighting series. What do you think, fighters? Are you excited and looking forward to the new developments in DOA6? Or are you upset, wishing the developers would hear you out and stick to their roots, being sure not to lose what it was that made DOA special and unique in the past? I don't want to see our community falter, or fighters turn against fighters. We need to keep fighting, but not each other, because in a way we're a family, and we need to take care of each other, not hurt and damage someone just because their opinion is different. Luckily, the developments for DOA6 are still very new, and there's a lot of time for any changes or adjustments to be made. We'll just have to keep waiting and watching to see how this new title progresses, and whether or not we like the new direction. What are you most excited for? What would you like to see in the new Dead or Alive? Or will you be turning your back to this franchise, as maybe you feel they've turned their back on you? I love this game quite a lot, and I'm doing my best to stay optimistic as well as neutral until more information surfaces, and will do my best to provide any updates should big news or updates arise. Until then, remember to stay considerate of others, be respectful even if you disagree, and keep fighting, fighters.